SAP. How to manage people? Very simple. All you have to do is just offer
Paradise after death, communism, success.
Did you think in the last 100 years we've somehow changed radically? Probably not. People still want to be happy. Yes, that's all. And today we've just changed the recipe how to get that very cherished thing. But unlike previous versions, the modern one is a lot closer. You just have to get out of your comfort zone, work hard, start your own business, buy a good suit and a house by the sea. And then…
But here, you flip through the pages of Instagram and you see those who were able to change themselves and touch success. It's right there, just on your screen. But you look and you feel like a loser, worse, a nobody. Life seems to go on, but it passes you by. Wait, can it really be okay? Today, we will try to deal with the modern concept of success and understand what is actually wrong with it. 1,000,001 curses how to come to enlightenment, icons, lives of saints. Has it ever seemed to you that the modern aspiration to success is so similar to something religious? One of the founders of sociology as a science, Max Weber, tried to figure out where the cult of success came from. His research led him to conclude that its origins lie in religion, or more precisely in Calvinism, one of the branches of Protestantism. Generally speaking, Calvinists look like rather strange guys compared to the rest of Christianity. So they believe that in fact, the fate of man has already been written by God. But according to their beliefs, God doesn't live somewhere far away in heaven, but exists in human affairs. For by him they are predestined. Therefore, success becomes synonymous with virtue, and if a man has achieved that success in his earthly things, it's a sure sign that he will be saved and will enter the kingdom of God. According to Weber, this Protestant ethic is what created capitalism. The development of the concept of vocation soon gifted the modern businessman a crystal clear conscience and hard-working workers. He gave them the perspective of eternal salvation in return for their ascetic devotion to vocation and non-resistance to ruthless capitalist exploitation.
Religion is not as important today as it was in the 19th century, but the ethics and culture created in that era haven't gone away. What has changed is the understanding of what salvation is. Where once their word was a kingdom of God, today happiness is promised instead, here and now. But how grounded are such promises?
In the beginning, let's define the modern understanding of success. This is first of all some material benefits, money, fame, and prestige in society. It seems that these are what promise happiness. But what if we turn to research? The most famous project to study happiness was conducted at Harvard. It began in 1938 and continued more than 75 years. It involved about 700 men who were observed from a young age. The subjects were growing up and became lawyers, workers, schizophrenics, alcoholics, and even United States presidents. For decades, researchers forced them to fill out questionnaires, studied doctors' notes, and interviewed their families. And after 75 years of hard work, the fourth head of the project, psychiatrist Robert Waldinger, finally announced the result to the world. It turned out that the main factor influencing happiness and health is good and close relationships with other friends. No other variables had as such much influence on the subject's life satisfaction source as a loving spouse and having good friends. Relationships are wonderful, but what about material goods? Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was living during Second World War and saw how thousands of people went crazy and couldn't return to a normal life after it. So it's not surprising that in his research he tried to identify the source of happiness. First, he decided to test whether money made people happy. And strangely enough, it does. It's hard to enjoy life when there's nothing to eat and not there to sleep. But after reaching a certain salary, money stopped to play a significant role for most people. And it's not huge money, but salaries 1.5 times higher than the national average. At least, this is true for the United States if we believe the research of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. Thus, since 1956, the level of personal income in the United States, taking into account inflation, has risen by about 3 times. But the percentage of people who consider themselves happy hasn't changed at all, and still fluctuated around the 30% mark. Csikszentmihalyi, in his research, decided to go further and find out what can make us happy in our everyday lives. He began communicating with scientists, artists, and engineers who felt they were living fulfilling lives. These people were doing things that were unlikely to bring them fortune and glory, but they still felt truly happy. Why? Mihai discovered that while doing their work, these people were often in what is known as a flow, a state of mind in which one is fully engaged in one's work and feels a kind of ecstasy. It's a concentration of attention that, as it builds up, leads to a sense of ecstasy. It's a sense of clarity, knowing exactly what needs to be done in a given amount of time, and you're doing it. You know that what you're doing is possible, even if it's difficult. You lose your sense of time, you forget yourself, you feel like you're part of something bigger. And once all of these components come together, your activity becomes valuable of itself. You have probably experienced something similar yourself, and not necessarily at work. For example, when you are playing, drawing, or solving puzzles.
Flow occurs during tasks of interest, when the difficulty of the work correlates with the skills and is called in psychology a state of optimal experience. Paradoxically, the best moments in life for people experiencing flow usually occur during work, not rest.
Probably, it is characteristic of the psyche that motivated us to activity and became the key factor that allowed us to start transforming the world around so actively. There are many techniques for achieving flow, but I wouldn't want to devote the entire video to it.
In addition to those reviewed, there are dozens of other studies proving that achieving success, as we understand it today, will not bring happiness to most of us, but maybe dangling a carrot in front of us that at least make us strive for a result is not such a bad thing.
Working 15 hours, sleeping 6 hours a day, running for companies. This is a typical day of a modern success icon, Elon Musk. He claims that if you follow in his footsteps, you can reach the heights of your career. It's very strange that giving such examples, they forget to add the phrase, "All tricks are made by professionals, don't try to do them yourself," because the psyche, like any other system in our body, has its limits, and what happens if it's overloaded, you can best be told by the staff of the nearest psychiatric hospital. For some reason, we decided that ancient people were workaholics, and we can be the same, and all our problems come from a lack of self-realization. But this is a mistake. The American anthropologist Marshall Salins, in his book The Economics of the Stone Age, writes that people living in primitive communities did nothing for most of their lives. Salins states that on average they worked 15 hours a week. Their working day lasted just over 2 hours. Exactly how long it takes to them get enough food for the next few days. Gatherers look for food from time to time, as supplies are exhausted. 2 or 3 days of hard work are followed by 2 or 3 days of absolute idleness. In this rhythm, humans has lived, as scientists believe, for about 1 million years. and only about 10,000 years ago we started working a little longer than sleeping, chatting and watching the clouds. So it's no surprise that, according to research, the average office worker actually works a little less than 3 hours in a full work day.
8 hours a day with 2 days off is 4 times longer than the workday of our ancestors. If they could value a passion for work, which is unlikely, they would have admired our ability to methodology get up early in the morning and drive to work despite the weather and state of mind. But even a standard 8-hour workday is too much for the average person. And this is not my fantasy, but research data.
But even a standard 8 hours workday is too much for the average person. And this is not my fantasy, but research data. This, for example, is what our productivity graph looks like depending on how long we work. Our psyche begins to break down when we work more than 39 hours a week. A publication in The Lancet shows that if we work 55 hours in a 5-day week, our health is seriously damaged. And after the age of 40, working more than 25 hours a week will be brain damaging. But is it possible to get to the top without overworking? Probably yes. It's even more interesting to look at the shadows of the greats, most of whom, as it turns out, had an excellent balance between work and rest. Gates, Spielberg, Jobs. Today we somehow forget that most famous people became so not only because of their hard work, but also because of luck. And by overworking, you are much more likely to earn yourself a burnout than to bring yourself closer to success, as it's believed in society.
You can be anything you want to be, you just have to take action. Happy people become what they are because they want to be. That's the philosophy of success.
It tries to build on positive psychology and Martin Seligman's theory of learned helplessness. In his experiments, 2 groups of dogs were electrocuted. The first group could turn off the electricity by pressing a special panel. The actions of the second group had no effect on anything. After that, both groups of dogs were moved to another box, also electric, but from which they could easily jump out. The first group of dogs did so, but the second group did nothing, even when the force of the shocks increased. This condition has been called learned helplessness, and it can also be observed in humans when they make no attempt to improve their condition in any way while still being able to do so. But how is this theory applied in practice? Coaches don't give a person a single chance to justify his own failure. He is led to believe that he, and he alone, is to blame for his troubles. Neither the economic crisis, nor bad housing, nor corruption had anything to do with it. As a result, in the 21st century, we have a rush of psychological disorders. Thus, according to World Health Organization, in 2000, almost half of all Americans suffered from mental and neurological pathologies. And in 2000, about 50% of all adults had anxiety-depressive syndromes. Such disorders most often manifest in response to personal and personality-society conflicts with the person. People feel guilt towards themselves for not being able to become rich, perfect, and famous, forgetting that such will always be a minority and not accepting themselves for who they really are. It must be even more frustrating for those who don't live in the richest countries. By accepting the modern understanding of success, these people, in fact, doom themselves to unhappiness because only a few of them will be able to achieve material success and fame.
In the end, it turns out that the cult of success is just another empty promise, forcing people to look for happiness where there really is none. But this video is not a manifesto of laziness. Rather, it's a treatise of mindfulness. It may seem strange, but perhaps in order to become happy, Many of us will need to give up some of our money and prestigious jobs, and instead invest our energy and time in a relationship that also requires constant effort. And instead of choosing a prestigious career, become a professional in a craft that will give you life meaning and pleasure in itself. Or maybe just relax, remembering that we are humans, not robots. My name is Sergey Liberov, and remember that the world is much more complicated and interesting than you may think.